Good evening. My name is Ted Barris. I'm a writer and a broadcaster, and I have lived in this community for 32 years. I know the election is still about 35 days away. In fact, today I went to a site that's actually counting it down. I think we're about 34 days, 3 hours, 14 minutes, and 27 seconds away. It's literally counting it down. They're obviously keenly interested, the folks who prepared that website. Until yesterday, when I was on the road in Alberta, I hadn't been thinking too deeply about the election. I was coming back from Alberta. I'd been part of a promotional tour on a book, and out in Alberta, I happened to be interviewed by a talk show host last Wednesday, September the 11th. And she hit me with a question. She said, "What are your thoughts about today, September 11th, 9/11? I'd been thinking about it. I'd been reading columns and listening to editorials in the days leading up to the 18th anniversary of that terrorist attack against the Twin Trade Center towers in New York, the Pentagon in Washington, and the location in Pennsylvania where passengers had attempted to retake an aircraft and where it crashed. Anyway, everybody was either writing in to this talk show host on email or text or calling in to say that the world had changed completely that day. And that's a fair statement. If you're talking about global relationships or the resulting wars in Afghanistan and Iraq at the time, and the general fear factor that gripped the country and the world, everything did change. But I commented last week when she put that question to me, and I repeat it here tonight, the one thing that did not change on 9/11 was this country's commitment to belief in and defense of the vote. Canadian elections remain free and open to all eligible voters, and no matter what race, gender, cultural background, lifestyle choice, or political affiliation, every citizen continues to have that right in this country, and you are proof that that's important by being here tonight. That's why tonight is so vital. A candidate forum is an endorsement of that enshrined right we all share. It encourages us not to be apathetic, but to listen, to question, to research, and based on that active participation in franchise, to make a free choice. It is a right, yes, but those of us who are here tonight recognize that it's also a privilege, one that we should never take lightly, no matter how many 9/11s are out there waiting for us. Here's the format of what's going to happen tonight. We have, in past candidate forums, been fairly straightforward with the statements and the questions from the floor. We're going to vary it slightly tonight. There will be opening statements from the candidates. They've chosen numbers, and they will give us opening statements of about 3 minutes to get us going. We have two representatives from the media tonight, the news media, to then ask some specific questions, some of which have come to us, some of which readers at the Standard and the Cosmos have initiated. And then after we've done that for a few minutes, we're going to introduce a slightly different concept. We're going to ask each of the candidates to question one other candidate about something specifically she or he would like answered, so that there's interaction among the candidates as well as from you to them. Then we will get to the audience, and that'll be the bulk of the evening, with questions coming from the floor. And when we get to that point in the evening, I'll invite you to the microphone and ask you to identify yourselves and pose questions. And that format will be a question, if you prefer to have it answered by all. I'll give a couple of minutes to each of the candidates to respond, and a little bit of elbow room for the other candidates to rebut and to respond in addition, so that there's some flow. I don't want to restrict the candidates in any way from jumping in those periods where there's activity going on. Although, when you have your opportunity to put a specific question to another candidate, let's allow those two to have that chance to engage. And then we'll, at the end, invite the candidates to come forward with some closing remarks. And that's basically what we're going to do. So we'll start with the opening statements, and according to the numbers drawn, the first speaker is Eileen Higdon, representing the New Democratic Party. Eileen?
Hello, my name is Eileen Higdon, and I want to be your MP. The reason I stand before you today is because since coming to Canada 46 years ago, I have trusted the federal government to take care of my interests. Look where we are today. Time and time again, they have constantly broke that trust. I cannot offer my grandchildren the life that I have had. The death of the fisheries on both the east and west coasts, climate change, the sponsorship scandal, the Senate scandal. Justin Trudeau promised he would do government differently. 40% of Canada is above the Arctic Circle. We are melting. Global warming is a reality. We are warming 1 degree faster than the rest of the world. We must all work together, listen to the scientists, elect a government who respects our planet. We must meet and exceed the carbon targets set out by the Paris Accord. There are millions of young people walking the streets of Canada today, worrying about what their future will look like. Today, I cannot offer, I am wondering why school children are striking on Fridays. To me, it appears to be a role reversal of the parent-child roles. Today, I cannot offer my grandchildren the life I had. We owe it to our children and grandchildren to change our approach from open for business to taking an honest assessment of what is working and what is not, to stop the overheating of Canada. I believe we need not be fearful about facing the reality and the gravity of the situation. When we work together, we can offer all Canadians a more hope-filled future. As your MP, I will vigorously pursue the fight to curb carbon emissions.
30 seconds.
The business model that we have created is a model where the dollar is the key and respect for the worker and the planet is at the bottom of the list. A vote for Eileen Higdon is a vote to improve the opportunity to give our children and grandchildren the future they deserve. October 21st, elect Eileen Higdon your Member of Parliament.
Thank you, Eileen. Jennifer O'Connell, our MP, and representing the Liberal Party tonight. Jennifer.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you to the Cosmos and everybody who put this event together. It's important in our democracy that we have this opportunity to hear from all of us and that we hear from all of you. I am Jennifer O'Connell. I'm the current Member of Parliament for the riding of Pickering-Uxbridge. A little bit about me, in case anybody doesn't know who I am. I have born and raised in Pickering, where I still live today. And I first ran in 2006 when I graduated university, not really expecting to win, frankly, but trying to get engaged into politics. I ran locally in Pickering for Pickering City Council. I did win at that time, and I served on Pickering Council as City Councillor, then I served Durham Region Councillor as Regional Councillor, and then as Deputy Mayor in the City of Pickering, and I was elected for nearly 10 years at the municipal level. In 2015 is when I first ran federally and for the Liberal Party, and seeking re-election here tonight. In the last 4 years, I served as a member of the Finance Committee, and then the Prime Minister appointed me as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance, specifically as Youth Economic Opportunity, a very long business card all of a sudden that I had. But why I bring that up is that I have been serving this community since I was 23. I view politics as an opportunity for change, as an opportunity to give back to the community, frankly, that gave so much to me. it was an incredible feeling for me, and continues to be able to walk down the sidewalk and that I'd walk to school on, and when I was in municipal politics, help fund to rebuild. Or now the parks or the natural areas in our community that I played in, we now are making investments to preserve, or planting trees in the community that I grew up in. So that's how I view politics and service, and that is why I'm standing for re-election. I think our government has done, and I'll look to you, Ted, for timing, I think our government has made a lot of progress in what we stood for in 2015. I look back at 2015 and where we were in the economy, where we were actually debating if we were heading into another technical recession. We had dismal unemployment rates. We had some of the worst growth since the Great Depression.
30 seconds.
And in just 4 years, we've seen so much progress. 1.1 million jobs created, some of the highest take-home pay in this country's history, and more women working than any time in our country's history. These are just some of the areas. I think, as Eileen already brought up, the environment is something that I am fiercely passionate about, and something that needs to be a key priority in this next election. I'm sure we'll talk about more of that, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to continue to represent the community that I've always called home, and represent on building the middle class and ensuring that we have an economy that works for everybody. So I'd like to continue this work and move this country forward.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Next to speak is Saima Musarat from the Conservative Party. Okay, did you get some more?
Good evening, Uxbridge, friends and family. What a great pleasure and honor to be here among this beautiful event today. Thank you, Ted, for having us today, and thank you, Cosmos, for hosting this event. I am Saima. I'm a mother of 2 boys, Noah and Jonah, a proud mother and a proud wife. I'm also a businesswoman, own a construction company, so understand what paycheck to paycheck means. Also, as a president of Friends of SOS Children's Villages Canada, I have worked for 20 years helping orphan and disadvantaged children throughout the world, trying to make a difference in their lives. For that, I was awarded Diamond's Jubilee Medal. So, running a small business, I can tell you one thing, is a huge challenge. I have to navigate through the frivolous red tape, the income tax, the payroll tax, the HST, and now the carbon tax. And then raising a family in a complex and politically correct world. These are the huge challenges we, the middle class, go from day to day. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you one thing. After door knocking 32,000 doors in the past 3 months, one issue keeps coming up. Economic hardship is faced by most of us. Every single house we door knocked, same issue keeps coming up. People are frustrated with the political frustration at the federal government level. People are angry with the economic hardships they and their families face. This has to end, and this will end, and it will stop. There are some rules for the Prime Minister and his rich donors in Montreal, and there are other rules for you and me. This is going to stop, and we are going to stop it together on October 21st. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a proud resident of Pickering. Pickering-Uxbridge is a dynamic riding surrounded by so many friends and residents of diverse background. I can assure you one thing, our region is growing fast. It's going through a transition, and I am going to make sure that I'm your representative who will amplify your voice in Ottawa on the issues which matter to you.
30 seconds.
Honest government, prudent finances, no deficits, community infrastructure, and our families are protected every day. So thank you so much. I'm now pressured to wrap it up quickly. But let me tell you one thing. Prosperity only happens one way. When government gets out of the way and Canadians and you decide how you want to live your lives. So let's bring this huge change, big blue wave on October 21st. And I want you to be part of this journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. Peter Forant, representing the Green Party.
All right, thank you very much, Ted. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of today's event for making the whole thing possible. It is my honor and a privilege to be here today for what I think is going to be the first of a great many of job interviews for the position of MP for you, the people of this riding, who are going to be our bosses. You know, I was raised in the west end of Toronto, grew up on the edges of the Humber River, and although my father worked at Ontario Hydro in the 70s and actually worked at the Pickering Nuclear Station building Pickering B, I didn't know too much about Pickering until I started dating my wife. All right. We have chosen to make Pickering home. It's been home for just over 18 years. This is the place that we decided to raise our two boys who are now in high school. But I can tell you, I feel many of the struggles of the people in this room who've been parents out in this area in this day and time, because I too am a parent just like you. For most of my career, I worked in the private sector. I've worked for companies as big as IBM and as small as a 3-person startup. Actually, even smaller than that, because I was self-employed for several years, working my own business practice, helping other entrepreneurs with 10 to 20 employees learn how to grow their business. So I understand what it's like to work for big companies, big organizations, and I also understand what it's like to run a business and work for yourself. I've got the scars to show for it. Okay. Now, exactly 10 years ago, can you remember where you were? Exactly 10 years ago, I went back to school. I went back to school to Seneca to study green business management, and that was in the throngs of the financial crisis. At that time, there were many what I would call recession refugees there. Gen Xers like myself, boomers a few years older, and students just out of school. We were from around the country, we were from around the world. We all shared one thing in common. We all felt like the rug was pulled out from under us, and we were going back to school to retool. So if you find yourself in that position, wondering what's going on in the world, how come it's not the way it used to be? What do I do next? I've been there. I feel the same way. Okay.
30 seconds.
Thank you. But I was lucky. 4 years ago, I won the job lottery. That's what we call it when you get a permanent full-time job. I am a teacher now at Seneca College. I teach entrepreneurship. I love my job. The best part of my job is I get to talk to the students. The side conversations are amazing. But they're asking me the same question. What's going on in the world? How come my student debt is 3 times higher than it was when you graduated, sir? Will I ever be able to afford a house, sir? And what's going on with the weather? Why is there flooding? Why is there fire? Why is there all that? So as a Gen Xer, as a parent, as an educator, I am alarmed at the effects of climate change. I'm alarmed at the fact that business as usual isn't working anymore. I'm alarmed at the fact that attack politics is destroying democracy. And I'm so refreshed to see you all here today, because it gives me hope that people still want to get educated. People still want to learn the ideas. And before I say anything else, if you remember that old commercial from Sim's clothing store in Buffalo, an educated consumer is our best customer. I think an educated voter is our best voter and the best boss that I can have when I go to Ottawa.
Thanks,
Peter.
Peter.
Very much.
Thanks, Peter. Representing the People's Party of Canada, Pickering-Uxbridge.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mesdames et messieurs, thank you for having me today. I'm Corneliu Cizu, a professional engineer and a retired major from the Canadian Forces with service in Bosnia and Kandahar, Afghanistan. I'm also a former member of parliament for Pickering-Scarborough East, and I was a candidate for Pickering-Uxbridge in the last federal election. People's Party of Canada is the only viable and sincere political party who put the interest of Canadians before anything else. We need to look for the future of our country and for a responsible leadership. We are focused on the issues that matter for Canadians, not the pundits, not the self-appointed experts and elites. These are economic and financial security, creating and protecting jobs, lower taxes for families, and keeping Canada and Canadians safe in a dangerous and uncertain world. We need a united country which is developed and thriving economically, not tribal diversity. We need a country where good jobs are available for future generations. We need a healthy, competent and qualified leadership in the House of Commons, Senate and public service who work for the long-term interests of our people, not for short-term gain and personal agendas. We need a modern judiciary which is unbiased politically, upholds high ethics and is responsible to the citizens in applying the rule of law. We need a press interested in supporting citizens to achieve excellence, a press that is not politically biased and cherishes the freedom of speech, which today is a prisoner of political correctness. That's what Canadians care about. People's Party stands steadfast behind the veterans, the men and women who sacrifice for our country. People's Party stands firm for the freedom of expression in protecting Canadians from censorship and discrimination. People's Party will focus on Canadians first before spending billions of taxpayers' money abroad on international projects without accountability. People's Party will give provinces the incentives to deal with wait times and raising costs of healthcare. And People's Party will work hard to balance the budget as soon as possible.
30 seconds.
Uxbridge is a wonderful place to live, but we need more jobs, especially for youth. For decades, Durham region has been neglected in infrastructure, transportation, and community services despite its sizable population. This election is about who really has the interest of Canadian at heart, to keep Canada safe, the economy strong, and assure a brilliant future for our children and grandchildren. On October 21st, I ask your support as the People's Party candidate in Pickering-Uxbridge to be able to serve you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. We're now going to move to our two media representatives to pose some questions. And we'll give each of you, if it's a general question, 2 minutes to respond. If it's specific, we'll restrict it to the candidate answering the specific questions, but I don't want to restrict you if you want to chime in because it's an issue that's burning for you. We'll certainly give you some rebuttal time as well. Yeah, I'll take care of that. So I'm going to move the lectern out of the way so people can see you. Is that good? Okay, sorry.
Still doesn't solve the weight problem.
Well, you'll just have to try to, move as closely to the mic as you can. I'll make sure that it's, if that one's not functioning, we'll get you this one.
This one's not functioning.
The other try.
What? Yeah, I took it off.
This one.
Thank you.
Play it very close. Looks like it's probably
This one works.
Yeah, this one.
Oh, you can have this one. I don't know. I can be heard.
Thank you, Ted. Good evening, everyone. As Mr. Barris mentioned, I'm Daryl Knight. I'm a reporter with the Standard newspaper. You may have also heard me on Hits 105.5 on Friday mornings at 8:30 with Dan Pollard. Thank you, Leisha and Ted, and all of you for coming tonight, and all of you for helping make this happen here at Uxbridge Arena, home of your 2019 Cougar Cup champion Bruins, in action this Friday night against Gananoque Islanders. So now that that job is out of the way, and thank you to Rogers for covering this. I should say hi to my daughters, Abby and Evie, who will be thrilled I was on TV. Now that all of that is out of the way, I'll finally get to my question. Assuming you could not vote for yourself, which of your competitors would you vote for?
Who'd like to go first? Peter?
Thank you for that fantastic question, because that was the question I was asking myself earlier this year. Who could I vote for? Would this be the first time that I wrote on the ballot none of the above? All right? And the reason for that is, I want people to think about this right now. We all read the papers. We know that the two leading parties are running neck and neck. The chances are that it's going to be a minority government. For the first time in probably over a decade, I would like you to vote for the person, for the party who you believe the most, rather than vote strategically against the one that you hate the most. If we have a minority government, it has to work. I know the last one under Joe Clark only lasted, what was it, a year? But a few people in this room probably remember, you were a lot younger then as well, and I was still, I think, in kindergarten. But what happened with the last most effective minority government in the late 60s? They brought in universal health care. They brought in the Canada Pension Plan. All right? They brought in unemployment insurance, which has been branded EI. So if I couldn't vote for myself, I'd be hard-pressed to decide which of the mainstream parties I would vote for, because politics is broken today.
Thank you, Peter. Eileen?
I forgot to say thank you to everybody for coming when I was up at the podium, so I'm going to take a moment now and say thank you for coming, and thank you to Rogers, and thank you to Cosmos for putting on and hosting this event.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Who would you vote for?
I'd vote for Eileen Higdon. Have you not heard the promo for the NDP party? What did he say? He said healthcare, he said pension plan, he said, what was the third thing you mentioned? Anyway, all fantastic things that came from the NDP. If you want change, and what we need is change. An NDP government has never changed the water supply so people would die. An NDP government has never been brought into an Airbus scandal and ran off with all your money. The NDP government has only worked for the worker. When it comes to climate change, only the best provinces are Saskatchewan and British Columbia. These are two influenced by the NDP. Now, think about that. You need to really be assured of what your future is. And this is a very, very important election. And I ask you to really consider where the people have come in the past. And I believe it's an NDP, and NDP will only be the best person to represent you in Pickering.
You've got 30 seconds, Eileen. Would you vote for someone else on the stand, if you had to?
Pardon?
I'm asking you to answer his question.
I would have to really think about it, but right now I'd vote for Eileen Higdon. Thank you.
Thank you. Saima?
Well, this is a very interesting question. Of course, my first option and first choice will be Saima Musarraf for the Conservative Party of Canada. But if I'm really pushed for a second option, I would vote for the Green Party. Conservative Party's first policy plan, which was rolled out, was a real plan for the environment. And our party is very committed and very serious about meeting the Paris targets. And our real plan for the environment is going to make sure that we have a clean air and our water bodies are not polluted. And the major emitters are there to pay for polluting the environment and making sure that we reduce the carbon footprint. So my second choice would be the Green Party.
Thank you, Saima.
Thank you.
Mr. Chisu.
Thank you very much.
It's there. You're there. You're playing it close enough.
Thank you very much. It's a very difficult question. I say it is not an easy one. So You know, we have the main parties, we have other parties here in Canada, so it is a democracy. You know, my intention is to vote for the person who has at heart the interest of Canadians and also the interest of the community which the person is representing. So I was in the parliament, so I know how difficult it is to manage local issues together with federal issues, so it's not an easy way. However, we can help our community. So I helped the community during my tenure in parliament. Again, it's very difficult to make a choice. There were two parties in the government, so we have seen the Conservatives, we have seen the Liberals. Time is to have somebody else. If I would like to vote for somebody, I don't have now a precise choice. Unfortunately, I would like to vote for the person, and here, in this stage, there are two persons that are equal for me, Conservatives and Liberals. So, if you accept my choice.
That's sufficient. Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you. It is a very good question, one that is probably not posed to candidates enough. I would say when it comes to the issues, I actually agree with Saima. I would vote with the Green Party, although I think we have very different interpretations, the Liberals and the Conservatives, in terms of how to move forward on the environment. But in terms of the actual issue that I think is facing us as a country and young people, I think the environment is that issue. I think that the difference between some of our parties, I'm sure we'll get into more of those details as the night goes along, and how we best want to get there. But in terms of an issue facing our country, facing the future generations, I think the environment is that issue. So if I still feel that when it comes to the environment and the economy, the Liberals do have a plan that I'm excited about. But to answer your question directly, when it comes to that issue, that's where I would stand.
Thank you. Alicia, are you ready to?
There you go. I'm not quite that fancy, I'm afraid. Sorry, Daryl. This is a question that was actually posed by one of our readers, and I've kind of glommed many readers fed into this question, so I'm summing it up for other people. Some municipalities, like Toronto, have asked that the federal government allow them to ban the acquisition and possession of handguns within their municipal limits. What is your party's position on introducing further restrictions on handguns, and what would your party do if it is elected to form government in this election?
Whoever would like to go first.
Sure.
Eileen?
The New Democratic Party would give the power to the municipalities and allow them to ban handguns in each municipality.
Simon?
So Conservative Party's policy on guns are very, very simple and clear. Putting a blanket ban and rules on law-abiding citizens do not keep our streets safe. So most of the crimes which are committed are done by illegal guns, and we need to do is bring reforms to have a strict border security to stop smuggling of the guns. We are going to repeal C-71, where the hunters and the sports regarding with the guns and rifles are not penalized because of the present government's rules, which we think are not very just for our hunters and our recreational sports gun clubs. And we are also going to fund the police for new technology and to help find anti-gang task forces. We're going to make sure that they are well equipped and well financed. That's what our party stand is.
I think that legislation that was just raised is not about restricting hunters and sport shooting. That was giving the power back to the RCMP to make classifications of guns. And the issue around AK-47s and guns that were designed for the sole purpose of mass killing. Also included in that legislation was lifetime background checks. And for the Conservatives to say that that is going to somehow make us safer is simply untrue. We should have gun legislation being looked at based on evidence and science and put back into the hands of the professionals and not a partisan issue. When it comes to the issue of allowing municipalities to ban handguns, our party is currently looking in that, working with the City of Toronto in particular and finding the right solutions. But it is not a one-size-fits-all issue. We have to combat gang violence and guns being brought into this country. We also have to support programs. We have to support police in them being able to do their jobs. But the ideas that background checks are somehow not a good idea, or the idea that these military-grade weapons should be on our streets, these are the types of weapons that are the mass shootings that have occurred, have destroyed communities and families, and those are things that should not be on our streets.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a little bit different idea about the ownership of firearms. The firearms, the legal owner of the firearms, they know what they are doing with them. The problem is with the illegal weapons coming to Toronto. What we need for this one, I just said in my opening statement, we need a judiciary who is protecting the victims, not the perpetrators. That is the way that we should do our business. And fact is that we introduced, the Conservative government before introduced a legislation that if somebody was caught with an illegal weapon, you know, he was serving time. You know, the Liberals annulled this legislation. They just wiped it out. So we need a judiciary who is taking really their role to punish the criminals. The owners of firearms, they are legal, they went through a vetting process, and so on. Now, when you are looking about, my colleague was telling about the RCMP to decide who and what is, to establish what is legal and what is not illegal. I think the Parliament is there to make the legislation, not the RCMP.
Well, there's not too much I can add to the conversation other than to say that one of the 6 Green Party principles is nonviolence. In fact, that's the first one that's listed for Green parties around the world. In general, it talks about living in a culture of peace and striving towards nonviolence between nation states and whatnot. At the micro level for individuals, I have a very hard time understanding why individual civilians need to have military-style weapons that are capable of killing 10 people with one pull of a trigger. I don't understand that. Certainly for hunters, certainly for people that need, for specific reasons, to have handguns, those, I agree with the others. The people who have them legally are behaving. How do we stop the influx of illegal weapons? I don't have an answer for that, but certainly that's something we have to look at. The other side of the thing is we have to look at the reasons why people are carrying these weapons. Why are criminals using them? Why do we have so much opportunities for youth to lift up their personal self-esteem in that type of environment? If we had better opportunities for those youth, they wouldn't have time to fool around with the wrong people. So I think we need to spend more time on the economic issues and find out why these people are drawn to the criminal behavior in the first place.
This is an important issue, and Eileen indicated that she wanted to have another crack at saying something in addition, which means I will give you each another minute if you choose to rebut anything that was said. Eileen?
one of the disadvantages of going first. It was the Harper government that cancelled the gun registry, and I believe there is no one solution. But to destroy a solution that people were for and could see in our cities was very upsetting for myself and for the people around. And yes, we do need to look at our social fabric and how we can strengthen those young people and stop them from being influenced in going to join gangs. But that's the reality we have, and we have to decide if we want to put that money where they will keep us safe. It won't be tomorrow, there won't be the results, but by investing in our young people, we would hope that we would move forward. And the gun registry is not coming back, but it is a big, for me, a big strike against it.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything?
Well, I'll just add, as I said before, the issue of guns is quite complex, especially illegal guns smuggled into this country, where there is no question that that is an issue. The problem I find with conservative policy is that they actually cut the budget for the CBSA to do that very work, to catch guns being smuggled into this country. We've reinvested in that. So we recognize that there has to be investment in communities, as has been said, in people. There has to be experts making decisions around access to military-grade weapons, but there also has to be enforcement at our borders. And when you have a party who cuts that enforcement, it's hard to take them seriously when we want to deal with the real issue of the smuggling of illegal weapons in this country.
Simon, if you'd like.
I just want to tell you that it's very important, again, that the judiciary should have a role in establishing legislation and respecting the legislation with the perpetrators. So there are other countries in the world, you know, Jennifer, for example, Switzerland, they have the weapons home. And there's no crime there. Why? Because they have a good legislation by this end. And everybody is respecting the law. And we should be able to respect our legislation and the judiciary to enforce it.
Just to follow up on the Swiss issue, I lived there for a couple of months back in the 90s when I finished university trying to learn some French. And I was quite surprised because at the time the people there were telling me that the per capita number of weapons was indeed higher in Switzerland than it is in the United States, which shocked me. But they quickly followed that by saying that each and every person in Switzerland is properly trained on how to use those weapons. And I think that is a big issue as well. If you're going to own a weapon, if you're going to make that part of your culture, everybody has to be educated. I mean, we have a graduated licensing program for drivers. I know that because our 16-year-old is going through that right now. There isn't one for weapons.
Thank you, candidates.
I'm going to jump in and add another question which was brought to our attention when some of the people coming in tonight wrote down their questions on slips of paper. In the introductions, in your opening statements, you all referred to young people. You all referred to the need to address their needs. I think it's time that we spend a little bit of energy exploring what specifically you would do to assist young people, whether it's keeping them away from crime, encouraging them to seek the education that they desire when it's so difficult with tuitions, or in the case of our community, keeping them here. What would each of you do in response to some of those issues to make sure our young people have a sense that their country is thinking of them too? Anybody like to tackle that first? Each of you has a couple of minutes. Mr. Chizu.
Thank you very much. This is a great question. You know, in Pickering-Uxbridge, we are, let's see, a commuter community and so on. We need the jobs here. We need companies to come here. We need a purpose. So we have two objectives here. You know, we have, and I said last time in 2015, we need to build an airport. I know, you guys, you don't want it, but unfortunately you're asking for the jobs, but that is the jobs. We need to recycle We need to...
Okay, we heard you.
We need to recycle the spent fuel at in the Pickering nuclear power plant. We need to have high technological jobs there. So if you are closing the nuclear power plant, you will not have anything for 30 years. You cannot use that site. And the fact is this one, you have there spent fuel, 15,000 tons. So we are speaking about the environment. Let's recycle. We recycle the plastic. Why we cannot recycle the spent fuel? And creating a center of excellence, or nuclear center of excellence in Pickering. Now, it is not in Uxbridge, but it's in Pickering, which is too close.
Thank you.
Maybe you don't like it, but that is the solution for youth to work.
They'll let you know with their votes, I'm sure.
Okay.
Who would like to tackle this one next? Eileen?
Sure, all right. Always one step forward. There is nothing for our youth if we create the carbons that we are creating. Well, they will not have the oxygen and the necessary lifestyle. And is our future, we really have to get a handle on the carbon. The Liberal government is at the same level of carbon restrictions as the previous Conservative government. We are nowhere near our Paris targets. This is a real issue and a worrying issue. And the NDP are committed to taxing the rich to put down the carbon levels that are existing.
May I direct you a little more closely to the point I was making about young people? I understand that an environment that is polluted doesn't help anybody. But do you have a specific thought about any one of the points I was referring to regarding young people?
Yeah, the NDP party is committed to not having student debt. You would go to school and get your education, and your debt, you would not have debt. And how we would do this, we'd finance it by taxing the rich. And what are we talking about the rich here? We're talking about anyone who makes 20 million a year. It is not anybody in our world. These are the rich as the rich, and they don't come and have tea with me, and I don't believe they have tea with you. But these people will be taxed 1% on their 20 million. I don't know what that is. But seemingly there is a lot of them around, and it will help pay the student debt.
Thank you. Saima?
So, being the mother of two boys, Noah is 17 and Jonah is 13, I can very much relate to this question. What Noah Jonah's future is in this country. Me, as a mother, is very concerned for their future. Our party's platform has been very, very clear. It's for the families. It's for our future generation. The way the present situation with our government is running debts after debts, deficits after deficits, I worry for my children's future. How Noah, Jonah are going to afford their future home, their future university degrees, their future basic necessities of life. Today, our government rolled out a new tax, an after-school activities tax, where the families are going to benefit almost $1,000 each child every year. That's a huge break for the families. The transit tax is going to be brought back. So most of the middle-class families, the young families, under the present government, under the Trudeau government, under the Liberal government, 80% of the middle-class families are paying $800 more in income tax. So how are they going to provide a quality lifestyle for their children? So we need a fiscally accountable government. We need lower taxes, and we are going to make sure that the future of our children are secured.
Thank you. Jennifer, and then Peter.
Thank you. This is actually a file that is very near and dear to my heart, since I spent the last year in Budget 2019 working on youth economic opportunities specifically. But I think here in this province, we've all seen what Conservative governments who claim to be for the people really do to students and young people. They put the they raise costs of education, they cut grants and services to our future generations. And so to contrast what we believe as liberals and as somebody who's worked on this file, that there are a variety of things that young people are facing that are very different, even frankly, although technically I'm a millennial, I'm on the very old end of being a millennial, but what we know is that young people need affordable housing, or housing that's affordable, something that in this region we really struggle with. So that's why we introduced the first-time home buyers incentive, which is an equity investment to help up to a first-time home buyer get up to $50,000 on a new property. In terms of education, our government has already implemented 50% more grants, which means these are grants that young people who do well in school or maybe need a little bit more help are going to access. And it's not loans, it's grants. The other is on those who have student debt. We've actually reduced interest rates. I was shocked when I became the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Finance that governments are actually making money on student interest. And we got rid of that on the federal portion. We've also created a 6-month truly interest-free time period for when young people transition out of education before they get their first job. The other environment has been touched on. We are leaving a huge debt to future generations, whether it's infrastructure and other things like that. And if we want to talk about jobs, which for young people is a huge issue, one of the biggest issues young people face after they graduate is not having the experience to get the job, and they don't have a job to get the experience. So one of the transformational things that we put forward in Budget 2019 was work-integrated learning. 84,000 spaces for young people in school, which counts as a credit, but they're also getting paid for meaningful work, so they gain that experience as part of their education experience, and then on the other side will have that when they're applying for their first job.
Thanks, Jennifer. Peter?
Tim, can I get you to restate the question, because you went in so many tangents there. I can't remember what the exact core was.
Well, my question was particularly in light of our community. A number of you are from Pickering, and perhaps the problem in Pickering is not as obvious as it is in a smaller community where young people, because of house prices, because of the need to go away to university if it doesn't, that opportunity isn't there for them, and the housing you've referred to. How do we keep young people from leaving this community forever? That's important to us in this community, and I would like for you to answer that. I haven't got time to go back to each of you. Perhaps you'll have an opportunity later on to address it, but try.
No, it is a very tough question. Is how do we keep the young people staying in the communities we're at? One of the key things that we need in a 21st century economy is to be connected all the time. So I think it's very important that the towns and cities across the country do have access to broadband internet. Okay. Now, I don't want them to have access to broadband internet just so they can check their latest post on Facebook. We need to do that so that we can use that for the knowledge-based economy. Some of the suggestions that we heard here seem to be 20th century solutions to a 21st century problem, such as the airport and the others that were mentioned. The other key thing as well is I would like to see, and I know this is a provincial issue, but I would like to see a return of trade skills to schools. All right? Okay, where have all the shops gone? Where have all the kitchens gone? And those are skills that you learn in grades 6, 7, and 8 that stick with you for life. And I think a big challenge that we have right now in terms of jobs is the jobs that are going, that we need are a lot more of the skilled trades jobs, okay? And if people don't get exposed to that when they're, pre-high school, by the time they finish high school, they don't know how to swing a hammer. I had someone describe to me, yeah, my kid knows how to design a light bulb but doesn't know how to change it. All right? So we need those basic fundamental skills back at the provincial levels to get people interested in the trades. Now, once you have that, then we can transition to working in any building. Every building in Canada needs to be upgraded over the next few years if we're going to meet our climate change requirements. How would you like to have a house that didn't cost you anything to heat and cool? Okay? How would you like to generate your own electricity at every house without having to be connected to the grid? All right? The people who do those skills, we can't offshore that to India and China to have them install the stuff on our house. But if we taught trades early enough, there's a huge body of work there that needs to be done, and those jobs are everywhere there's a building, there's a job.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
If I may add a little bit.
I'm sorry, if you'll have an opportunity later on to address youth, I'm sure. But I want to move to the third phase of this evening, and that is where I invited you to pose a question, one candidate to another, and that is an opportunity for the two of you to engage and leave the others out momentarily. I want to ask each of you, you were forewarned of this, so each of you has an opportunity now to pose a question to one of the other candidates and allow that candidate to respond in a couple of minutes. You're all looking a little stunned. I hope that's not a problem. Who'd like to start? Peter, you have the floor.
Thank you. Okay, my question is for the Progressive Conservative colleague here, and I think we've both stated a lot of things that we share in common. We want to get youth more involved. We want to provide more opportunities for youth. One of those things happens to be for sports. We also talked about transportation. We want the cost for transportation to drop. We want to make it more affordable for people to take public housing and that sort of thing. Now, you also mentioned that you're a business owner and that you hate red tape. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so are you seeing the Canadian tax law? Have you seen the book? For those in the room, if you haven't seen it, it's 3,000 pages plus, written in 2 columns in a super fine print font that I'm not even sure I can use with my cheater glasses here, okay? It keeps getting added to every year. Now, I think that the goals of what you were saying about getting more programs out there, such as the transportation dropping the cost, such as the sports dropping the cost, getting people involved, are all great. But why is it that the PCs always do it through a tax credit? A tax credit only benefits people who are paying high amounts of taxes, and the richer you are, the bigger of a discount it is. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense just to fund those programs directly so that any member of the community can participate in those programs? For example, why make me have to keep track of all my receipts for the GO train so that come April I can get the shoebox out and have to find out how much I paid all the time?
Why don't
we just lower the price to begin with so that everyone can enjoy that, no matter what their economic status?
Okay, so Conservative...
You have a couple of minutes to answer some of that.
So Conservative Party of Canada, under our plan, I just want to add, which I wanted to add previously too, under a new policy plank, our party has guaranteed that the federal transfers for health, for education, for social services and core services is going to be increased 3% every year. So that's an increase of 12% in next 4 years, which is going to flood the provinces for better school systems, for better health systems, for better housing, for better, the families who are struggling, the families who are in the lower income bracket, they're going to have a huge tax break. If you're talking about how the receipts are kept and how we apply for taxes, I think this is a question for a CRA, that they want certain amounts of proof how we file our taxes. I think that's a question would be for them. That's what I would say. So all I can say is that under the Conservative Party and under our new government, there is going to be a huge tax relief for the middle class. 80% of the middle class is going to benefit, and the people who are in the lower bracket, they're going to benefit the most from it. So that's what our plan is, and this is absolute propaganda that Conservative Party only looks after the interests of rich people. That's absolutely not true. We are a party for everybody, and we are a party for middle class, for families, for children, and for every single Canadian.
Thank you. I'll give you a
Just to
chance
be
to...
sure, the question was, why do you always deliver the programs through a tax rebate? Why don't you just lower the price, lower the red tape for everyone? You told us earlier that you hate red tape, but all your programs add more red tape.
Once we do get into power, we do get elected, and we are going to seriously look into how we can improve to get rid of the red tape. So the businesses can flourish and new businesses can come. So we are going to look into it.
I just want to pay less for the GO train without having to keep track of my receipts.
We will look into it. We will definitely. We'll take the suggestions. Thank you.
Who would like to address one of the other candidates? Cornelia?
No, I would like to address a question to my former parliamentarians. We are both parliamentarians, so we'll have a nice debate probably here. So my question is quite a tough one to you, Jennifer. Do you agree with Justin Trudeau that Canada is a post-national state with no core identity? Yes or no?
No, I think that what we believe as Liberals and the Prime Minister is that diversity and inclusion in this country is fundamental. And that creating division and fear as an election strategy is not what Canada is about. Other than Indigenous communities, we've all come here from other places. And we need to respect each other. We need to embrace diversity. Growing up, again, in the community, it brings me joy to represent such a vast array of cultures, ethnicities, and people. And so when we play on the division of fear and the division of others, and creating this as a political strategy, we are really selling ourselves short of a nation, and we should be working together to solve the country's greatest issues. And so I think that when these types of questions come up, it is a form of distraction away from the real issues that are at the heart that our country needs to face. And I think that in terms of our country and our culture is the fact that we embrace each other, that we celebrate each other, and that's what I believe that Canadians want from our leaders.
But again, Jennifer, I was asking you, the question was, is a post-national state with no core identity? Do we have an identity or not? Yes or no? As Canadians, do we have an identity?
I mean, I think the fact that you don't think Canada has an identity is a problem of its own. I think our identity is the fact that we are a nation of people who have come together to, and we embrace each other no matter your background. And so, of course, Canadians have an identity, but I think the politics and how we conduct ourselves around the world is about ensuring that, again, diversity and inclusion is at the core of what we do, and ensuring that I just find this whole idea that we should somehow erode the idea of acceptance, and as a country that we would even go into this line of questioning in terms of embracing each other and ensuring that diversity and respect for each other.
Thank you very much. Eileen, did you have a specific question for another candidate?
Yes, I would like to ask Jennifer. Justin Trudeau said that he was going to do government differently. I don't see any difference in this government than all the previous governments. The SNC Lavalin affair, oh God, I got a blank. But there's at least two other things that I wanted to point out. Election reform, thank you. Election reform, and oh God, it's gone. I don't see any part of anything different in Justin Trudeau's government.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I can say that I wouldn't have gotten into the party system because I was involved in municipal politics. I wouldn't have gotten involved if I didn't believe that there was a real space to make change. I've always been a Liberal, but part of why I joined Justin Trudeau's party and ran as a candidate was because of the inclusion. As a young woman, to be given the opportunities that I've been given, to not have this, old kind of style of politics, that it's whoever brings the most donors and whoever kind of does the building for the party, that those are the ones that get ahead. I have had incredible opportunities.
Sorry, what about Philpotts and JWR? They did things differently, and they're not included anymore.
Well, that's...
So my question...
Sorry, just a sec. Sorry, this is a discussion between Eileen and Jennifer, please.
I don't mind getting support.
That's okay.
So
well,
can I ask a question?
Not at this point. I'll invite some questions later for some rebuttal, but I would like this conversation to finish to its completion.
Sure.
So, do you understand why I say it feels just like anything different? Because if you promise things and then you go off, I don't think you have to tick 100% of your boxes, but you have to act in a way that is different. And the SNC Lavalin and the lack of trust that has developed through that of the Liberal government is very disappointing.
Well, I mean, I think what's important, and I think why it's so amazing that we live in a democracy where we can share differences of opinions. Amongst even our caucus, we have the Liberal caucus. We come from all different regions, from all different walks of life, and we bring up different issues, as you know, to the government and ensure that our voices are heard. In terms of doing things differently, I can assure you that having gender parity in cabinet is not a small deal in over 150 years in this country's history. To ensure that women are being represented in cabinet is incredibly important. As somebody, like I said, myself, who have been at times the only women, I was one of the only women sitting around the finance table. These are changes that matter. Having more young people, having a more diverse caucus are changes that matter. And frankly, having investments that build the middle class, that grow the economy and create jobs and create an economy that is lifting everybody up, that is a stark difference from the previous government. And so I would say we have done politics differently, and we've delivered for Canadians.
Thanks, Eileen and Jennifer. Saima, did you have a question specifically for a candidate?
Yes, Jennifer, were you on the committee which shut down the investigation for the SNC Lavalin and Judy Wilson?
No.
You did not sit on that committee which shut down the investigation? I just sat down.
Would you like me to answer? I was a member of the Finance Committee. I filled in on the Justice Committee and asked questions to Ms. Wilson-Raybould when she appeared, but I was not a regular member of the committee. So as motions were introduced, I was only filling in for one day. I'm not a member of the Justice Committee.
You had voice but not vote.
Well, I filled in for one day. Those hearings were a series of hearings, and so I was actually at the time I was a parliamentary secretary, so I was a member of the Finance Committee, and I filled in to ask questions for one of the hearing dates. I'm not a regular member of the Justice Committee, and I never had been.
Well, I think that's not true.
You can look on the government's website. It lists committees, and it lists when
there are videos out there. We can prove it. You were instrumental in shutting down that investigation, so I'll leave it at that.
I clearly stated I filled in for a committee for one of the hearing dates, and the record is there. Of course there are videos because I said I filled in. I'm not a member of the Justice Committee.
Okay, I think Saima seems satisfied to leave it at that. Jennifer, you had a question for a candidate, please.
Sure, I'll actually ask my question to Saima. So in terms of the Conservatives' policies and platform, the Conservatives have decided not to have the independent parliamentary budget officer review and do a full costing of your platform. So I'm curious as to why, and if in your opening statement you suggested that the budget is going to be balanced, which even your leader Andrew Scheer did not commit to. So I'm curious when the costing for the budget platform will be released, and if you are going to let Canadians know in advance of the election of what programs you plan on cutting, or like Doug Ford, will you inform voters after the election?
Okay, first I would like to answer your question with another question. Trudeau promised that 2019 a budget is going to balance itself. So first, could you please answer that question?
No, your question.
Excuse me, this is designed to allow the candidates to express themselves. We're not a rabble. We are not a rabble. We are a community.
Could you please
that
answer this question, and I will answer all your questions accordingly.
I'm happy to answer these questions.
So did the budget in 2019, as promised by Justin Trudeau, balance itself in 2019? That was your election promise. We have $71 billion deficit now on us. So please explain.
I'm happy to. So what our commitment in 2015 was to grow the economy, was to invest in Canadians, and was to grow the middle class and make the investments that Canadians were looking for. And we did that. One of the first things we did was lower taxes for the middle class. We created the Canada Child Benefit, which combined with our middle class tax rate actually gave, on average, a typical Canadian family $2,000 more every year. What we also did is we turned the economy around from an economy under Stephen Harper that after 10 years added $150 billion to debt. Those are facts. People, you can have your own opinion, but you can't have your own facts. There was $150 billion of debt added in the 10 years of Stephen Harper. And what did that get Canadians? It got the wealthiest 1% tax credits. It got us one of the worst growth rates since the Great Depression. And it had families no better off. What we've been able to do through investments in just 4 years was to invest in Canadians that have created 1.1 million new jobs. Predominantly are full-time, and with women working more than ever in our country's history. We've also, the youth unemployment rate is usually nearly double that of the unemployment rate across this country, and we have made significant reductions in that. However, I do think there's a lot more to be done in that area. But our commitment was to invest in Canadians. Our commitment was to grow the economy, which we have done, and we have one of the best economic records in the G7, something that the Conservative Harper government could not do after 10 years and $150 billion worth of debt.
Thank you, candidates, for your questions. I'm now going to move.
There wasn't an answer.
80% of the middle class families are paying more in taxes, $800 per year. How can you say that your spending or your budget reforms or your government has given a relief to the middle class families? And how are 5 top female MPs treated by the Liberal government? You talk about, a lot of more women. A woman is a big focus for the Liberal government. How were the top 5 female MPs were turfed and treated and insulted, cabinet ministers and MPs? Could you please answer that? And our budget and our policy
You've addressed a number of issues there, and we've run out of time. I would like to...
Because there's so many concerns and questions with the present government.
I understand that, but we've gone through 4 or 5 minutes when I offered you 3, both of you. So very quickly, Jennifer, respond to one of those points, and we have to move on.
Sorry, I was just curious if I was going to get an answer to my question.
I'm sorry. I lost track.
Our policy platform will be released very soon, and we can assure you it's costed and it's been seen by the budget officer, and it is going to be balancing in next 4 years our budget.
Okay. Let us now move to the floor, because I know that there are a lot of issues that you would like to raise. So those of you who would like to move to the microphones, I remind you that I would like each of you, before you speak, to identify yourself, and if you have any connection to The candidates, we would like to know that in advance of your question, please. I don't want to exclude anybody, but I also want to make it fair so that we understand the context. So we have a bit of time left, and I'd like to get to the floor. And in this round, if the question is directed to a candidate, that man or woman has a couple of minutes. I'm not going to disallow rebuttal, but make it clear that you would like to respond, and I'll allow that to happen. First speaker at the microphone.
Hi.
It's there.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Roger Valley. And I understand the format, Ted, but please don't cut me off. The pharmaceutical industry in North America is under great scrutiny right now. But here in Canada, there was a story on CBC just a little while ago about a young girl who requires a certain drug in order to stop going blind. And just recently, a pharmaceutical company made a little tweak to a formula that was being used to supply this young girl with drugs. And because they made this little tweak, Health Canada gave this company the sole right to sell this drug, and that drug skyrocketed to the point that this family cannot afford that drug. Now, Jennifer, I sent you a message on Twitter about this, and I asked you what your government was going to do about it, and I didn't get a response.
And well, now she has an opportunity to respond.
I would like a
Jennifer?
response now.
Sure. Sorry about that. It's on Twitter is a hard way to communicate in terms of questions, but I'm happy to answer this. So, one, this is not an uncommon situation, sadly, in this country, and I've had a case in the riding with another young girl who needed a medication and the cost, and it's actually under the rare diseases. And so what the issue is really at the provincial level, the calculation of which provinces and territories will fund rare disease drugs, because they're usually high cost and a lower number of patients that require it. Once Health Canada approves it for safe in this country, then it becomes a question of whether or not provinces and territories will cover it. However, part of Budget 2019 and the recommendations from the panel looking at a national pharmacare program, one of the significant areas the Budget 19 covered was actually money for rare diseases. And the reason for that was this is one of the biggest hurdles in creating a national pharmacare program with provinces and territories, because this is an area where, especially not only in Ontario, but you can imagine in smaller provinces, like let's say PEI, where you might have one patient that requires a drug that could be millions of dollars, and they're making determinations on whether or not to fund that. And so by the federal government investing with provinces and territories to rare diseases, we're bringing it all under one umbrella.
30 seconds. So
that the government can be the negotiator, and you have one negotiator, rather than what happens in this country is each province and territory negotiates prices, then insurance companies, etc. And so we are creating a fund for rare diseases to help, to ensure that we can move forward on this. In addition, we are creating one system to ensure that one negotiator for this country, and that is a big factor in bringing down these costs. So it's a complex issue, but it's one we're investing in, and it's one that as National Pharmacare Plan comes out, because we have a second report from that panel, and how we can move forward to bring the cost of prescription drugs down in this.
Thanks, Jennifer. Eileen, you had a comment.
Yes, the NDP promises a pharmacare program that would allow all medications to be covered by the government. This is a dream that the NDP put forward. The NDP will not bankrupt you because of this. We are very excellent, financially efficient people. There is no interest in Canada, is no fear that we would overspend. It is not in our budget, but our promise to all Canadians is to have a free pharmacare program. and whether it's a diabetic who every day has to take insulin or need a blood pressure pill, they are going to be free for all.
Cornelia, you have a comment?
Yes, a comment. The life of Canadians should be our priority, should be priority of the government. Instead of spending money abroad, we should spend money for our own people. Doesn't matter what the cost is.
Anybody else have a comment?
The Liberals have been promising a pharmacare plan for decades. They have done absolutely nothing about it. It was in their 1997 election platform. It was again promised in 2004. There is no reason to believe that this time will be any different. It is clear that the Liberals would have to drastically raise taxes in order to implement what the Hoskin reports recommends. Conservatives know that some Canadians struggle to pay for and to access certain prescription medications, and we are considering many ways to help these Canadians to better afford these medications, and we'll say a lot more as we proceed further into the election as our policies roll out.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please. At the microphone.
Hi, my name's Henry Zacek, and I have a question for everyone. You can do it with a show of hands. But basically, before I came here today, I did some research on how much debt we Canadians are in. Now, the total figure for Canada's debt plus Ontario's debt amounts to $1.04 trillion right now. Now, that's an amount that most people just can't comprehend. I certainly can't, and I would imagine most people here can't either. So if you take it on a per person basis, that works out to every single person in this room, the cameraman, the candidates, the reporters, everyone here currently owes government-imposed debt of $43,014.
And your question?
My question is this. For a family of four, that's $172,000. You add your mortgage to that, you add your car payments to that, you add your tuition to that, we're broke. Who here will support an annual statement mailed to every single Canadian taxpayer with their income tax return showing how much in debt each Canadian is every single year, and show the incremental increases every year that we have to pay for all the promises that are made that everything's going to be rosy.
Okay, who wants to tackle that first?
So I want to see a statement, an annual statement.
Okay, well, you've made the point. Thanks very much, Henry.
So, if I may go?
Sure.
So by the end of this year, the Trudeau will have added $71 billion to the national debt with little to show for it. The share of each Canadian family for that colossal $705 billion debt is more than $50,000 per household. The cost of servicing that debt will raise 40% to $34 billion in just few years, almost the same as the federal government spends on health care. Runaway deficits with no plan to balance can only mean one of two things: a future tax increase or future cuts to your social programs like health care. The previous Conservative government eliminated the deficit and paid down the debt when times were good to cushion the blow of the next recession. While the debt when times were good, Justin Trudeau is doing the opposite. When times are good, he spends. When times are bad, he still spends. So under Trudeau, there is no path back to balance. Another 4 years of Justin Trudeau's runaway spending, we will have an economic crisis on our hands.
Thank you. Anybody else like to make a comment, please?
Sure.
Yes, Jennifer?
So when it comes to the question, a big part of that was you mentioned the provincial debt. So this is something the federal government has no control over in terms of provinces across this country. So in terms of the federal portion of our economy...
Jennifer, you collect taxes at the federal level. That's why it's not fair.
Not in every province, actually. In Quebec, they collect it. So, what is important to note also is that you have to look at the debt to GDP ratio. And when you look at the debt to GDP ratio, our debt levels is actually going down at the federal level. And It is. And what we have seen in the past is we have seen cuts to programs, cuts to veterans, cuts to seniors, cuts to Canadians, and that got us $150 billion of debt from the Conservatives. In addition to that, the Conservatives claimed that they ran balanced budgets, but they didn't. In fact, they inherited a $13 billion surplus and spent through that in the first 2 years, and then had a deficit
30
budget.
seconds.
So what I would
disagree.
just say.
Each of the candidates has 2 minutes to respond to the question. I'm trying to dole that out fairly.
So these are the facts. These are the figures. I don't make them. They are reported on by independent parliamentary budget officer, for example, and you can go and look at this. But I think what we have to decide, and the type of economy we have to decide, what do we want? Do we want to invest in Canadians and ensure the economy is growing and not leaving people behind? Or do we want to create cuts to services and help the wealthiest 1%?
Thank you.
And that's what we had with the past 10 years.
Cornelia, please, and then Eileen and Peter, please.
I will be very brief. You know, we are one of the highly taxed nations in the world. The issue with the debt is dealing with how our taxpayers' money is spent. If we are spending badly, we will have debts. So what is this? How we can resolve this situation? It is to lower the taxes for the people and to spend the money, the taxpayers' money, wisely. Because nobody seems to be responsible how the taxpayers' money is spent. So this is the secret. The secret is this one: to be able to manage the taxpayers' money better.
Eileen?
Can I add?
No, I'm sorry. I'd like to go. The remaining candidates have a chance to respond to the initial question on the debt.
I remember the hospitals attempted to send out your bill after you were discharged from the hospital, and it was not well received. I surmise personally that I don't think that would be well received. But at the same time, I don't think there's anything wrong with going to the website and finding out the financial report on the website. I think that's okay.
Peter?
Henry, I think that's a terrific idea. I'm all for transparency and knowing what's going on, not just in the financial level, but everything else that goes on within government. One of my pet projects is personal financial literacy. Remember, I'm teaching at a college now with a lot of folks in their 20s, and I'm surprised at how little they know. But then I've talked to some of my friends, and I'm surprised at how little they know. And I went on a whole journey for becoming a do-it-yourself investor and all that sort of stuff. And it's amazing how much the whole of the population doesn't know. And I'm afraid that just putting that information on the tax form will be ignored anyways. What we need to do is get back to a point where we are educating everyone from the get-go about financial literacy, both for the personal level, and then we can understand it at the business level, then we can understand it at the government level. So you have a great idea, but right now it would just be, I think most people would ignore it.
Thanks, Henry, for the question. Next questioner, please.
Oh, thank you. My name is Rod Voss. I'm a current resident of Uxbridge, formerly from Claremont. I had to get that in there. I didn't think we were...
Welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much. I didn't think we were in such rough shape as a country, though. I always thought we were a lot stronger than what I'm hearing about tonight. But anyways, I guess we do have some rough roads to iron out. But one of the things my question is geared towards another part of our segment of our society that I think is in a lot rougher shape than we are. And I'm referring to our First Nations people. And I know that the federal government has a responsibility, a big responsibility that it's taken on historically to try to make life a good standard of living for our First Nations people. It's kind of a silent voice here. I don't know if there are any First Nations people here tonight, but anyways, I'm sure there are. But anyways, my question is simple. and that is, how would you, as a representative of the federal government, plan to address the questions of the problems that our First Nations people face with regards to education, health, and social issues?
Who'd like to go first? Eileen, go ahead, please.
Sure. And clean water would be nice too. The First Nations, because I said 40% of Canada is north of the 60th parallel, we're in the Arctic Circle, and it's melting up there. Houses are sort of like that, and you can't live on them anymore. They need a lot of support, and it's compounded because of the climate change effects. The NDP government is committed to enforcing the recent court case and the support for the survivors of the residential schools. And it has to be coming from the Indigenous people themselves. It can't be imposed on them. So my first thought would be to have them at the table and ask them what they need and how we can help them.
Okay, who would like to go next? Saima?
So the Conservative Party supports the reconciliation process with the Indigenous people. The Conservatives are focused on bringing forward policies to make real and measurable improvements in the lives of Canada's Indigenous peoples. Conservatives support effective investments in important areas such as housing, health services, and good quality drinking water. It is critical that government spending translates into meaningful results on the ground. The Trudeau Liberals have failed to take any steps to create sustainable economic opportunities for Indigenous people. The Trudeau Liberals have created endless barriers to the economic development for Indigenous communities, including the cancelling of the Northern Gateway pipeline. There can be no true and lasting reconciliation without economic reconciliation. The government must act to empower Indigenous communities to share in the wealth that Canada is so capable of creating. It is time to work together to create a positive future for Indigenous youth, including increasing economic and education opportunities. Conservatives supported the national inquiry, but called for it to bring the answers closer to a closure and peace victims' families desperately needed. We were disappointed that Trudeau Liberals let the bureaucracy and the red tape come in between and refused to listen to the families of the victims and the Indigenous organizations who raised serious concerns throughout the process.
Thank you.
The Commissioner requested for 2 years of extension, which was totally ignored.
Okay, thank you very much. I still want to hear from Jennifer and Coligny and Peter.
Sure, thank you. In regards to the inquiry, I just want to touch on that for murdered and missing Indigenous women. The previous government, in fact, did not support moving forward with that inquiry. So that at the beginning. In terms of thank you, first of all, for this question, because it's incredibly important. And I think the challenge that we will have moving forward is this, that at the baseline, we need to accept that anything that the federal government does needs to be done with nation-to-nation relationships. This cannot be a process of the federal government imposing what the federal government sees as a cost-benefit analysis or results-driven. This needs to be done in a variety of ways. One, when it comes to infrastructure, things like clean water, to think that anybody in this country, a nation this wealthy, does not have safe and clean drinking water is abhorrent. And we are moving forward.
It's terrible.
And we are moving forward on our clean water advisories. We've lifted a number, but we still have more work to be done. We are on track. We are on track to meet those commitments, but obviously in some of these communities, some of the advisories that are left are some of the most challenging in terms of infrastructure. But we are committed and we've invested the money to move forward. In terms of culture and language, communities have been ripped apart through residential schools and young people being taken and removed from their communities. Their culture is lost, their language is lost, and we need to make these investments. The other thing is we do need to give hope
30 seconds.
on reserves and Indigenous nations, and so we need to be working with each community because each community has different needs, and we need to ensure that there are economic opportunities, but that we're respectful of what those communities want and that we are not imposing the federal government's will. And I'll just give one example that was in Budget 2019. One of the biggest issues with land claims and treaties that are ongoing in this country is Indigenous communities not having the legal means or abilities to even know how to negotiate or read some of these agreements. And so the government has actually put forward funding so that Indigenous nations can actually hire their own legal services and Indigenous leaders to review these documents so they are not making the mistakes of the past and signing off rights without fully understanding their legal rights in this nation. That's just one example.
Ladies and gentlemen, that issue and the question, thank you for your question. It is a very important one. We need to tackle this situation really seriously. Many promises, nothing done for years. So just don't forget, the Indigenous people are all Canadians. We are all Canadians. We need to resolve our problems, but we need to sit down and tackle the issues. Not by bureaucratic stuff. We need to speak with the people. When I was up in Fort Albany 25 years ago, that was a communication there. It was it was a railway going to Fort Albany, to Moosonee. And it was a contact between the Indigenous people and Canadians who were going there to see the beauties of James Bay. So when we are really talking to the First Nations, our government in Harper government didn't do too much on these things. Previous Liberal governments, nothing. So it's time to sit down and to tackle really that issue. Handing out money doesn't make it. It's not a way to deal with issues of the Indigenous people. We need to embrace them, and we need to live all together as Canadians.
Peter?
Yes, thank you for the question. This morning, as you may know, Elizabeth May was releasing our newest policy documents, the whole things that were there. I was at work and came almost straight here, so I haven't had the chance to read through all 90 pages. What I can tell you is that reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is near the top of the 8 different major things that we're having there. Definitely we're talking about health and wellness. We're talking about cultural revitalization and healing. There's also a section there about respecting Indigenous sovereignty, and I think most important as well, respecting the treaties and land claims. So it is a complex issue, but it's one that the Green Party feels strongly about, so much so that it's at the beginning of the document.
Thank you very much. Next questioner, please. Thanks for your question. Appreciate it, and thanks for coming from Claremont to give it to us.
Ginny Calling here, and my question is a climate change question. Since 1990, the UN's climate scientists have been coming out with reports every 5 or 6 years, each one more and more urgent, telling us that we needed to act on climate change. We've largely ignored that. In October, they came out with their most urgent message to us yet, that we have until roughly 2030 to reduce our emissions by about 45%. to avert climate catastrophe for our kids and our grandkids. What's your party's goal when it comes to reducing emissions? Does it fit with what they're saying we need to do?
Peter, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, actually, the 45% target, to my understanding, was worldwide. In Canada, we've been lagging so far behind. Our target's 60%. Okay. And it's really complicated to listen to that, but you may have heard Elizabeth May is saying, we've got to take this on as if it's World War III. We got to think about what our parents and grandparents were doing back in the early 40s when they all united, all hands on deck. They knew who the enemy was. We know who it is, but we're kind of ignoring it right now. And I don't know if Elizabeth May is going to be like Churchill to Chamberlain, calling out the true evil for what it is. But what we do need, and Elizabeth has talked about this, is we have to put aside partisan politics. We have to get together and we have to put a multi-party war cabinet together, all hands on deck to make a change. But it's really hard to convince people that change is good. For example, I heard a figure on the weekend, it just made total sense. If we all drove at 80 kilometers an hour instead of 120 on the highway, we would cut our gas consumption by 30%. We would drop our fuel costs by 30%, but we would cut our greenhouse gas emissions in that sector by 30%. But who in this room is willing to drive at 80 kilometers an hour right now? There's a few of us, okay? And if you drive to work in Toronto, you probably do only 20 kilometers an hour most of the time anyways, all right? So
30 seconds.
Thank you. So, but what we have to do is make it more attractive to do the low carbon emission side of things. So, for example, taking the GO train, I referenced that before. For you to take the GO train from Pickering-Ajax downtown, it's $8 one way, $8 back. If there's two of you going down, that's a lot of money. It's $32. It's actually cheaper to pay for gas and parking, depending on where you're parking, to do that. We need to make the GO train close to free. I don't know how we could do it, but we have to make it more convenient to do what's right and less convenient to do what's wrong.
Eileen?
This is very important to the NDP party. We, as I've stated before, have looking at our children are walking around the streets wondering what their future is going to be like. People came back from the Second World War knowing that they needed to change and do things better, and out of that came Tommy Douglas's Saskatchewan healthcare, and it went nationally. I'm asking you to look at what your future you're offering your children. We need to make changes that are, I'm like you. I'm addicted to plastic. I love plastic. And I'm amazed when I realize how much plastic I touch in a day. I'm more aware of it. So I'm not saying I'm finished with it. I'm holding on to my plastic, but I'm trying to make myself aware of how much plastic we are having. And yes, driving the car is always better to drive at a lower speed. Our Premier suggested we would allow the 140 kilometres an hour on the 400 highways. I went, no, for numerous reasons, but climate change is to be aware of it, and how we get up in the morning and how we approach our recycling, how we approach our own lives. And if you go on an aeroplane and get on a plane in Toronto and go off in Glasgow, as I have done many times, the carbon produced on my seat is 3 cubic feet will melt of the permafrost. That's my seat. I love my seat. I'm having a hard time giving up that seat. I don't see myself going across on the ocean on the sailboat like Greta, but I'm not. But I have to have the recognition that our daily lives is contributing to this problem.
Thank you. Saima?
So Conservative Party's a real plan to protect our environment was the first policy plank we rolled out. Conservative Party is very serious about tackling this huge and important issue. We are going to meet the Paris targets by setting the emission standards for major emitters that will lower the greenhouse gases and drive Canadian businesses to the highest standards of green technology. Create a 2-year green home tax credit for homeowners to help pay for energy-saving renovations. Establish a green patent credit that will reduce the tax rate to 5% on income that is generated from green technology developed here in Canada. Create a new fund for community-based projects targeted to wildlife enhancement. Ban the export of plastics waste unless it can be shown that it will be recycled at its destination, and impose tough penalties for violators. Work with the producers to minimize the plastic packaging of products. work with provinces and municipalities to bring an end to the raw sewage dumps into marine and freshwater ecosystems. So our plan actually is very scientific and will meet the Paris targets, unlike Liberals' plan of putting a price on the carbon and bringing a carbon tax, which is just a regressive tax. It's just a money grab to hurt the families.
Okay, thank you. All right. Corneliu?
Ladies and gentlemen, I will have a little slightly different opinion. The climate change exists, there's no question about it. However, we don't need to be alarmists. If we are alarming ourselves, I'm sorry, the international panel, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 2007 said that the glaciers in Himalaya in 10 years will disappear. So, you know, it is a controversy here. We need really to tackle the climate change in the realistic way. We cannot say, and why I'm telling this one, I'm an engineering physics graduate with a master's degree at the University of Toronto, so, you know, our universe is moving. There are different interactions here, which we cannot even control it. The better money would be investing in how we are stopping the hurricanes, how we are going against events in the nature that we know that are happening. So we don't need to be alarmist. You know, I feel sometimes that climate change, I feel myself in the Middle Ages, in the time that everybody was saying that the earth is flat.
30 seconds.
Only Galileo said, "Eppur si muove." And it was punished for that one. So let's take it. It's a serious question. Pollution is a serious question. We as Canadians, we are the largest polluters. We are the largest persons who are putting garbage out. So let's start there before we are going on the high spheres.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you. This is an issue that I do feel is critical to not only our country, to our future, but frankly to our economy. And what we need to do is, or what our party has done already, is we have put a price on pollution. So this notion that you're going to make pollution free again is frankly ridiculous. That economists have, around the world, Nobel Prize winning scientists have actually proven that pricing pollution is one of the most effective ways to reduce carbon emissions. But it's not the only thing that has to be done, by no means. But one of the key parts of our plan was ensuring that any of the revenues that came to the government from pricing pollution was to be given directly back to the jurisdiction where those funds came from. So in provinces and territories that implemented their own form of pricing pollution, those jurisdictions received the funds to make investments to green their economy. In places here, like Ontario, where Doug Ford would rather spend $30 million on fighting the federal government, on putting up stickers on gas stations and canceling the planting of trees, we have given back those funds directly to residents to start making greener choices. Because we know that if we are going to meet the Paris Agreement targets, and by the way, the Conservative plan nowhere acknowledges meeting the Paris agreements.
30 seconds.
So if we are going to truly make an impact and truly meet these targets and transition to a green economy, we have to do so in the right way. There's going to be transition, and we have to make the investments to ensure that everyday Canadians aren't hurt and that we can transition to the green economy. And frankly, Canada is positioned well to be a leader in this area, to be able to lead globally and actually grow the economy at the same time as reducing emissions.
Thanks, Jen, and thank you very much for your question. Ted.
My question is for Jennifer.
Would you identify yourself, sir? Most of us know you.
My name is Ted Ing, organic farmer. I grow 150 acres of organic vegetables. I'm going to get personal here with Jennifer. I phoned you twice in 2000 2016. In 2016, the federal government audited all the farmers across Canada with who had offshore labor. It is still continuing. A friend of mine in Skoogog is being audited. What are they auditing for? The working conditions of the offshore men and women. Okay? In 2016, I had 16 offshore labor and 8 Canadians working for me. At that time, the minimum wage was 11 something. They took them away. I called your office twice, March 6th and March 7th. And then my friends and I and my church went down to the Minister of Immigration, John McCain. And then I phoned a former politician in our riding. You did not. You say you're for agriculture.
Okay,
you are not. You didn't do nothing for me.
Okay, what is your specific question, Ted, please?
President, the Conservatives wrote the legislation. It's like the audit that they did in the Senate. They spent $50 million. The Horticulture of Canada has a booklet out. These are from the farmers. They're saying, are you going to appeal that act and change it that you do not audit farmers? Because I've had these men for 42 years. They've been in this country for 46 years. And we have to increase these men because Canadians, I used to employ 35 students. I've employed hundreds of students over the years. Now, this summer, we employed 0. And in your government had a question in 2017, came out with a policy that was anti-religion. We had to answer the question.
Okay, your question is about ceasing the audits. Can I ask? May I allow her to answer the question?
Because
okay, you made your point, Ted.
There are now 20 employees instead of 26.
Okay,
and
but you want the audits repealed? Is that correct?
That's right. And I want Simon to answer that, please, too.
Thank you. So the question is in and around temporary foreign workers, which is significant in this country for the agricultural industry, not only in this province, but across the country. To answer your question, no. In terms of audits, audits are in place to ensure that temporary foreign workers are being treated in a fair and humane way, that their living conditions are, I don't know your particular case or what the audit found.
You should have found out. You should have phoned me. You wouldn't answer my phone call.
But
you didn't do no service. No service.
If the issue is in regards to the temporary foreign workers and the licenses, the issue is in around ensuring that, for example, there's adequate housing. That
I built a brand new bunkhouse in 2011.
Let her answer the question, Ted, please.
These audits would be done by the department, by bureaucrats, not politicians. And what is done is to ensure that human rights are upheld in this country, that working standards are upheld in this country, and that individuals are paid a fair wage. When it comes to the temporary foreign workers program, there are improvements that we do need to make. Some of those are things like, for example, year over year, some employers will have the same workers come forward, and they have to go through the same application process every single year. And so there are things that we can do to streamline this, to ensure that if workers are coming and if these standards are being met, that there is a faster processing time. What we're finding in this country is that we're not being able to process these applications fast enough, and we're missing growing seasons.
30
but
seconds.
in terms of ensuring working conditions are safe and fair, I think that is something as all Canadians, for any worker in this country, needs to uphold.
Yeah, but
Simon, did you want to respond? Because he was directing the question to you, too.
Why didn't you service me? Help me out.
Those audits are done by, like I said, the individuals in the
The
bureaucracy.
auditors told me to phone your office.
Simon, would you like to respond to the issue of audits?
Temporary foreign workers and seasonal agriculture workers is an important issue for Conservatives as well. Canadians should have first access to the jobs in Canada. However, employers are encouraged to hire Canadians to meet their labor needs.
They won't come to work.
Temporary foreign worker program is designed to fill labor shortages while Canadians are not available to meet. Conservative Party recognizes that programs need to be flexible and take into account the realities on the ground while at the same time looking for ways to encourage people to be able to be matched with available work. So according to to answer your question on audits, our party is going to be rolling out new policy on tackling this problem, and you will be very happy and satisfied on that.
Would you care to, Simon, would you care to elaborate what you mean by that?
Until the policy is fully rolled out,
Okay.
I cannot elaborate.
Did anybody else want to comment, or can we move on to the next questioner, please? Peter?
I just want to say that it's the policy of the Green Party of Canada that if someone is qualified and good enough to work through a temporary foreign worker program, there should be a pathway to make them a permanent resident.
Thank you very much. Doug?
Thank you, Ted. My name is Doug Moffat. I have a question that's related to the environment and climate change. And I want to be clear that it is related to those items. The issue of more airports and flying and the waste of carbon and pollution that comes from that seat that you use to fly to Glasgow. All of those are very important, but there is a substitute that's been proposed by the people in the Land Over Landings group in Pickering, which would take the airport lands and convert them to agricultural lands for future generations. I want to know, do you support the conversion of those airport lands from airport use to agriculture, permanent use, and will you suspend forever the Pickering Airport?
Eileen? Okay.
I 100% work tirelessly to have no airport in Pickering. I have lived here in Pickering. This is Uxbridge, but I've lived in Pickering for 46 years, and never at any time did I ever even think that an airport would be a right thing to have.
Well, I've fought it for 50 years.
I have the sadness that all the loss that those lands and the families. I could not imagine. And the idea that the region supported this proposal. I spoke at Pickering Council. It didn't show up at Pickering Council because they knew they were going to have a big chance, people complaining about it. Anyway, it is an item that's for the federal government, and I 100% support the Land Over Landings agricultural use plan, and I would continue to work tirelessly not to have an airport in Pickering.
Cornelia?
So my question is this, you're right that agriculture is very important. It's very important to use the land for agriculture, right? For you. On concession number 4, you have a solar farm, solar panel farm. So why you are not using it for agriculture? Here in Uxbridge. You don't know about that, right?
I do know about it. I've seen it many times.
So I'm asking, if you are looking for the agricultural use of land, we have 3 times the land of Pearson Airport. I agree with you that we should use better the land, but that should not be excluding an airport.
You do not need an airport.
Well, I must disagree with you because many people, 60%, it was a referendum question, and 60% of Pickering accepted it.
No, that goes for Durham Live, not for the airport.
Simon, would you like to chime in, please, on this?
Yes, so airport is, I've door knocked over 40,000 homes all across Pickering-Uxbridge. I've asked the residents same question again and again. It's a split issue. So having a business background, I am pro-development, but that does not mean that I am for the airport or against the airport. Right now, I still need to know more. There is a report sitting at the Federal Minister's Transportation's desk. Why doesn't our sitting MP help us get that report released so that we can make a calculated decision whether that airport in Pickering is going to be beneficial or it's going to be a big fiasco or a disaster for our environment. So please, I really want our sitting MP to help us release this report so that we can make an educated and calculated decision whether this airport should be built or not. At the same time, Pickering is growing. Our region, Pickering-Uxbridge, is growing. It's a region in transition, and we really need to look forward to creating more jobs, more economic stimulus in the region. More businesses should come here. Most businesses should, the existing businesses should flourish so that we can keep jobs here in our own region for our future generations, for our children, for our youth, so that they don't have to commute and sit for hours on the highways. So we need to bring jobs and businesses back to Pickering, Uxbridge, and is airport going to be beneficial in that respect? We still have to find out. And I want our present MP to help us release this report, which is sitting on the minister's desk. Why is this KPMG report not released yet to us?
Peter and Jennifer, please.
Okay. Well, I think it's pretty easy to look at. We don't need an airport, okay?
Good for you.
Now, an airport is a 20th century solution to a 21st century problem. I think it's an amazing unintended consequence that this has been locked up for the last 50 years, because otherwise it would have been paved over like Richmond Hill or Milton or other places like that. The technology is coming on board now. What we need is a high-speed electrified rail corridor between Windsor and Quebec. It's clear. That's what we need, and that's where our resources should be going. If you were to Google high-speed rail in Spain economic benefits, it's been done before. And the amazing thing is all the smaller cities and towns along that high-speed rail have seen growth. So rather than our youth and 100,000 people a year needing to move to Toronto and the GTA, those 100,000 people could be down in Windsor, they could be down in Chatham, they could be down in London, certainly connect to the tech hubs in Kitchener-Waterloo, all the way to Quebec City. And that's carbon-free transportation that benefits everyone. Now, let's ban the airport, but I certainly don't want to see it paved over like Richmond Hill or Milton.
Thanks, Peter. Jennifer?
Thank you. This is an issue that I've been working on not only as a member of parliament, but as a city councillor and regional councillor in Pickering for a number of years. There has never been a business case for an airport.
You're right.
And there still continues to be no business case for an airport. And what is so important in this area is economic development. I think we all agree on that. However, there is this undervaluing of agriculture in our economy. And this is Class 1 farmland. So I don't just talk about supporting these lands for agriculture. One of the things I was able to do in the last 4 years was working with the Minister of Transport. And for the first time in over 45 years, those agricultural lands were year-to-year leases. That doesn't allow for the type of investment from farmers and from communities. And for the first time in 2018, our government implemented 10-year leases starting in 2018, so till 2028, for the agricultural portions of these lands. This is so important because, one, it is ensuring the protection of these lands are used for agriculture, and it is allowing for long-term planning for farmers and investment. And one of the, again, through the Finance Committee, the Minister of Finance commissioned a report from, or a panel, Dominic Barton, and an economic advisory panel. And in a series of these reports that came forward, what they found was one of the greatest opportunities for Canada for economic development is do what you're good at. And one of those things is agriculture. We could be leaders in this region for farming, for jobs, for technology. The amount of technology that comes from the agricultural industry, the amount of young people getting into this space. You want to keep young people in this community, create good jobs in agriculture and support it. And take this notion that this airport is going to solve all of our problems. There's never been evidence to suggest it. Let's use the Class 1 farmland for what it was intended for and farming.
Thanks, Doug, for the question.
When will the report be released?
Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4 speakers, 4 questioners left. I'm afraid we're going to have to cut it off at the 4. June?
My name is June Davies.
I actually ran in the 2007 provincial election for the Green Party, but unfortunately since then I realized the party system approach to public decision-making is not working for the public or for life on this planet. Every 4 years, the galley ship of government that we are rowing, the public is rowing and paying for, gets swamped, either provincially or federally or both, and one party gets dumped. And rarely is the same party in power at the same time, provincially and federally, and if so, not for long. What regional and municipal governments thought they could plan on and bank on goes out the window each time the ship changes hands. The NDP, up to this point in time, and the Green Party are, from my perspective, for all intents and purposes, conscience parties. The Liberals and Conservatives tend to rule the roost.
Can you move to a question?
And the question's coming. Do we have, right now we have what I call people for the economy. We don't have economy for the people. I'm wondering which parties whose candidates are sitting here before me tonight are realizing the need to change the very system of which they are a part, and that's the party system itself. We need a collaborative, cooperative, publicly driven, bottom-up based process of decision-making based on Kate Rayworth's donut economy. Check it out. And we need now to give the desperate climate change crisis that we're in needs our full focus. And all our projects need to have climate change as a driving force. I don't care what part of the economy. And I'm wondering, and collaboration happens when decisions for the next 4 years have already been made. You have your platforms in front of you. If you win, those decisions are what you carry out. Where is the collaboration?
Okay.
The question is, how are you going to build in public participation to the political system where our voice does not get compartmentalized?
More public input.
Yep.
What's the, who would like to tackle that one? Simon? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to want to put you on the spot. Who wants to go first?
Electoral reform was promised, but it hasn't happened in this election. Thank you guys for coming out. I really made the evening, and I wanted to appreciate that all of you who came tonight. Electoral
reform, yes, go ahead.
I've got a cold. I'm running tired now. Is one disappointment, yet again, from the current Liberal government. And it's one that we would pursue would be electoral reform. I'm getting tired. Yes, I can't remember what I was going to say, so I'm going to
Okay, collect your thoughts. We'll come back to you. Yeah. Peter?
That's one of the reasons why I'm running, because I was tired of all the broken promises. And electoral reform was supposed to change all that. All right, we need to collaborate. And again, Elizabeth May has worked on that committee, and then the Trudeau government just pulled it out. I was shocked to learn that First Past the Post only still operates in the UK, in Canada, in the United States. Every other major democracy, even the former Commonwealth ones, have changed. And if we look at the different countries with the craziest politics going on right now, I think I just named them, didn't I? All right. It's going to be tough. Maybe if there's a minority government, maybe we can pull it through this time. All right? So again, I just want to emphasize to everyone, don't vote against the person you hate the most. Vote for the people that you think have the best policies, because if we have a minority government, that's going to be the closest thing we'll have to collaboration. And this might be our last kick at the can.
Okay. Simon?
So all I can say is we have Liberal government right now, and all the election promises they made, all of them were broken. First past the post was broken. The balancing the budget was broken. Right now we are in, I would say, a financial debacle at the federal level. We have to bring an end to this political corruption, mismanagement at the federal level, and the only party who can save us is the Conservative Party of Canada. We are going to...
Okay, that's fine. We don't.
It is the only party
shout at our
who
candidates.
cares for fiscal accountability, lower your taxes, and keeping money back into your pockets, not spending on the deficits and on disrespect for your hard-earned money. So all I can say is October 21st, there is an opportunity to bring a fiscally accountable and an honest government and balanced budgets, and it's time for all of you to get ahead, and let's bring that change.
Thank you. Let's try to get back on track, if I may. And thanks, Simon. The issue, I think, was public input to the decision-making, which was, I think, June's point. Cornelia?
When you are speaking about the public input, that is very important. It is crucial for us to going ahead as Canadians. If you are speaking about the electoral reform, it is a very complicated issue. It is a very difficult one. We need to find a solution, a Canadian solution to this. We cannot look at other people for what they have done. We need to go to our resources and to see what is the best for our nation. So public input is extremely important, and the discussion, the free discussion is important. It's important to have all kinds of ideas, because that is putting us forward. You know, not forward like the liberals, but that's okay. We must go forward as Canadians. And this is an issue. Participation, public participation is somehow today is not there because is in prison of political correctness. Let's talk to each other. And I am quite sure that we find the best solution.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you. So there are lots of issues here, but let me talk about the issue of public involvement and representation, because this is something that is at the core of what I believe in as somebody who has represented the community and hopes to earn that chance again. But what matters here, and I'll talk about electoral reform, but what is also so important is that you have representatives that truly understand, are willing to listen, and bring these issues forward. We might not always agree on policy, we might not always agree on party, that's healthy democracy. But having somebody that is going to bring these issues forward and knows how to work in a bipartisan way. And I'll give an example of when I was working with cross-party lines to have Lieutenant Colonel Sharp honored in the House of Commons. This was a massive challenge in a system where tribalism and who gets credit for what is so critical. But it was so important to this community, and frankly Canadians, to have Sam Sharp honored properly and this historic wrong corrected. And it took me, frankly, years of negotiations between my own party, the Conservative Party, and the NDP. And we had to anticipate the Green or the Blocs coming in because we required unanimous consent of both houses. That is an incredibly difficult feat. Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers, but what I'm saying is for the issues that matter to our community, I am going to fight tooth and nail, and I already have, and I will continue to. And that's what public consultation and representation should be.
Thanks, Jennifer. Eileen, did you want to offer another thought? I wanted to give you a chance. Okay, thanks very much, candidates. Next questioner.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Jennifer, for calling us personally to show your concern for the house fire we had. Remember, I called your office and talked to your assistant?
Would you tell us who you are? We know, some of us know.
Yes, well, I want to thank her because...
Would you just identify yourself, Faith? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, my name is Faye, and the last name is Kerr. And I've called you on a number of issues, including my concern over the dairy industry, asked you to advocate on behalf of the dairy industry because of the excess glut. And I'm not even in it. You know, I just care about farmers, and this is a farming community. My family are original pioneers of Canada, so through my Clawton family. Anyway, getting back to what I would ask you, please, to do, and you can respond appropriately. Thank you, first of all, for the Breed Party to come in for. My son sells solar panels, and I also know what lack of inclusiveness means, and I'll go into that more privately. But I would ask what you're going to do. What you're going to do when you get elected, either re-elected or elected for the first time, to work with the rest of the people and their ideas. And that means that we like what you said. You're an informed man. I know that because my son's in the business. And so what I'm appalled about is, for example, here, I'll give you an example. The oil industry, they need to convert some of their revenue, but they won't talk about getting into that industry, but they need to. You know, it's like anything else. The well runs dry, and when the well runs dry, you're out of business.
Okay, I think you're driving at is an issue that was raised a number of questions.
Large corporations that have to understand the consequences because the future of the economy is green.
Okay, I don't know that I heard a question there, but if you'd like to add to the thought, please do. If not, we can move on.
Ask that question. What will you do to work together, not as separate entities?
Cross-aisle cooperation. Cross-aisle cooperation is a point. Jennifer?
Sure. Well, I said a little bit earlier, but I'll maybe focus it in terms of working with other parties. I agree this is something that is fundamentally broken within our system and within democracies around the world. I would really like to see us start to return to debating policies versus just which leader you don't like or who you hate less, I think was kind of commented on earlier. I would like us to get back to debating issues. Frankly, I found in the House of Commons the committee process was some of the most valuable work that we were able to do because we were able to work with parties. We often, frankly, worked with the NDP at the Finance Committee when we had policies that we both shared ideas around, but we had to get the wording quite right. And I think Canadians don't see enough of this work that is done. But I do think we have a lot more to do. When it comes to climate change, frankly, we cannot do this alone. We cannot do this in silos, and we need to be able to work together as parties, as leaders, and frankly, even within our own caucus, we have differences of opinions based on the regions we come from. And so more public dialogue, but I will say, in this election, what is so important, like every election, there's always an important issue, but in this election, voters need to vote with the environment and the economy going together.
Okay.
Because if you don't, you get politicians like Doug Ford, and the message will be sent that the environment is not a priority to Canadians.
Cornelio?
So it is very difficult to work across the line, at least on the federal level. So I experienced this
I think that, sorry to interrupt, but everyone agrees that cooperation is great. How do you create it is what she's asking.
Well, I can tell you, I can give you an example. When I was member of parliament, I was working very well with Tracy McCharles, who was a liberal member of provincial parliament. And we were able to accomplish a lot because we put aside, when you are looking for the community, you need to put aside some ideological issues. And you need to look what is the interest of the community. And we achieved a lot. I don't know if that cooperation exists now between Jennifer and the other members of the provincial parliament, but I can tell you that was a great satisfaction to work together and to achieve results. We made a lot of infrastructure projects. We made the French Maze-Meg Marina. That was a cooperation between the federal, provincial, and municipal level. So we achieved things that probably if we would be politically, entrenched in our ideas would never happen.
Thank you. Sama?
So what's the question? Could you please repeat?
We were one of the phrases that has emerged in the literature, particularly in news reporting, is the need for cross-aisle cooperation. I'm paraphrasing or trying to channel what Faye was talking about into a question. Can you cooperate with other parties without being partisan?
Absolutely. I mean, federal level of government works with the provincial, and provincial works with the municipal level, and not necessarily at all levels of government it's the same party. So it is very important for our parties to understand what's good for the people, and there is not one policy which has one party which has a monopoly on one policy. If it's good for people and for Canada, I think that the parties who in power should incorporate them and make sure that everybody benefits from it.
Eileen?
I think it's essential, if we are going to face the realities of climate change, that we must work together and come up with solutions that are agreeable, and we can get the targets met as quickly as we can. That's it.
Peter?
It's surprising how much I've learned about business and learned about government by coaching baseball. And one of the things that our head coach this year on one of our travel teams, the cheer every game was, is it me or we? Is it me or we? Is it me or we? And we all go, we. If you put your ego aside and you don't care whose idea or who gets the credit for it, the whole team wins. And that's the whole thing, right? So we have to put our egos aside and just focus on the goal. Canada has to win against the war for climate change, against the war for social injustice and so forth. We have to put our egos aside, and then we can start working together.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the question. Sir.
Jack McQuarrie from Goodwood. I have a question concerning environment, climate change. The reality is that a population of the world is increasing exponentially. In my lifetime, it is 6 times what it was when I was born. Meanwhile, the Earth is a sphere. It's not going to get any bigger. How do you deal with that fantastic climate change? Will civilization exist by the end of this century?
For me,
yes, go ahead.
The question comes right back to think globally, act locally. I cannot do anything about the heating up of the equator and how horrible it is to be there.
We're not talking about heating the equator. We're creating an increasing population which requires food. And it's increasing exponentially, and the world is the same size. You're going to run out. Do you have any solution of how you're going to, what you suggest to do before the end comes?
Okay, so a couple of things. There are 90 billion, with a B, 90 billion animals being raised in animal husbandry now to feed people. All right, that's a scary number. Almost half of our greenhouse gas emissions are tied to agriculture and animal husbandry. Okay, what got us this far is not going to take us forward. So just switching. I'm not a vegetarian. Don't get me wrong. I love a burger. The barbecue burger is great, but we don't have to eat those every day. All right, and if we ate like the previous generations did, we would cut out a lot of that. The second piece of it is the population growth is happening in countries right now that would be considered developing world. In the countries where education levels are going up, especially for women, where the standard of living goes up, the population is actually decreasing. All right? So we need to lift the world up from the abject poverty that it is, bring them up to the level of education that they understand that these things are happening. So yes, what you say is absolutely true. The good news is the studies that I've seen have said it's going to tap out around 8.5 billion, and then it's going to start going down.
Simon?
So, as we discussed previously, our party is very committed on environment plan. It's a very comprehensive and a detailed plan. I already went step by step how we're going to tackle the big environment issues. So it's the most comprehensive, most detailed plan, and it's going to help families, and it's going to help our environment and it's a global issue, and we should play on a global stage on this issue.
Are you suggesting birth control?
Cornelia?
Sir?
You put an extremely interesting question, and this very straightforward. What we will do with the increasing of the population? I think that is an issue that we need to consider very seriously. In 10 years, I think the population is growing up exponentially. So what we are doing, so that is an important issue. I think it is much more important than climate change. That is an important issue, and nobody seems to tackle this issue. Personally, I don't have a solution for you. I need to tell you that, sincerely and frankly.
Jennifer?
Thank you. Yeah, I think your question is in and around consumption too, and consumption-based economies. And so what we need to do to deal with consumption and emissions is we need to create an economy that with green technologies, we need to curb consumption where it increases emissions and start, the way we build needs to be done differently. The way communities are built needs to be done differently. Technology needs to be utilized to ensure that we are transitioning to a low carbon economy and a low carbon community. And so there's going to require a lot of technological changes to help us do so. But there is a lot of, even within municipalities, that we need to work with, and that's why the federal government is partnering with municipalities to help make communities more efficient and to consume to reduce emissions.
Thank you, Jack, for the question. Appreciate it. Last questioner. Sir.
Rob Cox, local dairy farmer. My question to the other four candidates is, I'm well aware, unless you would like to add in, Ms. O'Connell, what is your view on supply management? The agriculture industry right now is in a fairly big turmoil. These trade wars and everything else are affecting us. I am a father, a fourth generation. My family's been here for over 150 years, and I'm suddenly to the point where I'm scared that our government is going to erode the agriculture industry to a point where food comes in instead of going out. So when I back up to the supply management question, that is something that's due to me. The Liberal government has just released their plan, we'll call it that. But I'd like to know what the other candidates' position is on supply management, please.
Cornelia?
Well, you know very well what is our position on the supply management, the People's Party. We will abolish the supply management. But I am telling you something. What is the big problem that I faced it, and I was speaking with other farmers. Do you know that, for example, we are speaking about trade. Do you know that, for example, Canada never fulfilled the cheese quota with the European Union? So you as a farmer, if you would be able to sell your products in the European Union and abroad, you will have more money than the supply management. But the big problem is this one that I was discussing with the Dairy Farmer Association. They were not interested to develop the markets for you. And I think that you will make more money exporting your beautiful and great products that we have.
Simon?
Justin Trudeau failed to keep his word and stand up for our dairy farmers by agreeing to the unprecedented concessions in USMCA to Donald Trump. Not only did Trudeau give away 3.59% of our dairy sector, he also agreed to limit its future growth by agreeing to put a cap on Canadian dairy exports. The United States will continue to subsidize its dairy industry, leaving our dairy producers at a disadvantage. Canadian dairy farmers need a government that will actually protect their way of life. Conservatives will continue to stand for milk, egg, and poultry producers for protecting supply management. That's our party stand.
Thanks. Eileen?
Supply management is quite a thorny issue when you're dealing with Donald Trump. I really have no thoughts on it, and I'm really aware that there is a real issue, and I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards about what your thoughts are.
Peter?
It is a tricky, complex question. However, I think the role of government is to make sure that the playing field is kept as level as possible. Supply management may not be perfect, but it's a pretty darn good system. I don't know why would we give that up and then put people like yourself, small business people, right? Farmers are small business folks. If you have no stability in knowing what's going on, then all the risk is on you. And when the risk is succeeding or failing, that's too high. I'd rather see supply management, demand management put in place so that all participants have some reasonable semblance of stability so you can plan 1 year, 2 year, 5 years down the road. Knowing from one season to the next whether or not you're going to succeed, that's rolling the dice, and that's just not right.
So on that question, it was the Liberal government that was fiercely defending supply management when Donald Trump wanted it abolished during the new NAFTA negotiations. It was Stephen Harper who was telling the Conservatives that Canada should just concede and accept what Donald Trump wanted. We have been pushing hard at the table to protect supply management. It's interesting that the Conservative candidate talks about not supporting the agreement, yet Andrew Scheer said he would ratify NAFTA as negotiated by our government. What is important is to ensure that supply management is upheld. With the USMCA, or new NAFTA, there is $75 billion of economic export in agriculture that these markets are opening up, and we are currently negotiating with farmers and the dairy industry in particular to ensure that they are protected and fairly compensated. We've done the same with the CETA agreement and trade agreements that we negotiate. This is about ensuring that we support the Canadian system, supply management, but also that we fairly compensate when we have to make negotiations to open up markets for Canadians around the world. But like I said, we were the ones fiercely defending it when Conservatives wanted to concede and allow Donald Trump to rewrite and abolish supply management.
Thanks for the question, Bob. Appreciate it. Please be patient with we've gone long, and I appreciate your sticking with us, those of you who have. We're going to take a few more minutes and allow the candidates to wrap up, give us their final thoughts and closing statements. So please stay with us as they do that. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to gather if you need to go to additional papers or whatever. Are you all set? And we'll go in the reverse order that we did at the top. Thanks again for allowing them to do that. We start with Colin, you, because you finished the first round. You start the closing.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure to be with you today in a very place where 140 years ago, Sir John A. Macdonald, the father of the Confederation, started his quest to reform the old Tory party and returned to Parliament as one of the most successful prime ministers of Canada. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have history, we have tradition, and we have values in Canada. Here in Uxbridge, we have history made by sacrifices of many sons and daughters in the great wars of the war which shaped Canada as a nation. We have Sam Sharp as an example of an MP and a hero soldier. We have the tradition of the Quakers and the Goulds. And we have the values enshrined in us by Lucy Maud Montgomery and our own Ted Barris. The other political parties today are embarked on ships steadily going and drifting towards the globalist wonderland. Ladies and gentlemen, our party stands steadfast for preserving our country, our Canadian values, and assuring that we are paving the way for our children and grandchildren to benefit and to thrive in this great country called Canada. We have chosen the hard task of continuing to build the best united country in the world, where Canadians cherish the freedom of speech and work hard for their dreams, confident that their families will be safe and their children will have the best possible opportunities in life. I stand firm in continuing to build our great country and community, and please, if you agree with what I said, vote for me on October 21st. Vote for People's Party. Let freedom, fairness, responsibility, and respect rule again. God bless, and thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Cusack. And thank you for the compliment. That was very kind. Peter.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for sticking it out to the end. I really appreciate that. Thank you to the hospitality of the people who put this on tonight, and thank you to my fellow competitors, I guess, for today's debate. I just want to sum it up. When you think about who you're going to elect, think about the values that they represent. Okay, we're not going to have all the answers up here, prescriptive answers for everything, every little question. The challenges are going to change, all right? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen a couple of weeks from now. We don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now. And we certainly don't know what's going to happen in the first 3 years of the next parliament. Okay, I sure hope that we're working together and that we're attacking climate change, and we're attacking it in such a way that provides jobs for everyone across the economy, all right? We have to look at the people first and bubble up that way. So just to summarize, what are the main policies of the Green Party? Well, of course, we're looking at a sustainable 21st century economy. We need new thinking to deal with the old problems, or else we're going to have a repeat of what's going on there. We need strong communities, whether it be Pickering-Uxbridge or somewhere up north with the First Nations. Every community has to be more resilient, more robust on its own, and be a great place to live for its citizens. We need good government. We need more transparency. We need more cooperation. Again, I don't care where the ideas come from. If they're good, we should implement them. And I'm really confused when I see the Conservative Party, who were the ones who first brought in the idea of a carbon tax into this country. It was developed by Republicans. And now they're saying, no, it's a bad thing just because they think they'll get elected. I believe that our party is one of the few up here that is really looking for the long term. We're looking beyond the next election to see what kind of a country, what kind of a world we're going to be leaving for the next generation. And finally, we're not afraid to call it what it is. There is a climate crisis out there, and we can solve it. And while solving the climate crisis, we're going to solve our economic and social injustice issues as well. So if you haven't considered the Green Party before, I strongly encourage you, Google Elizabeth May TED Talks. She's delivered a couple of really good ones out there about the climate emergency, but also about electoral reform. They're quite entertaining, and they're only 15 minutes long, so have a watch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Saima?
So, first of all, thank you so much for all of you coming out today, and it's pretty late, but still you're all here. Thank you so much. It means you are worried for your future, and you want to know which party is the best party, which can represent your future and for your future generation. So I'll ask one question. Who do you trust to put more money in your pockets so you and your family can get ahead? A new Conservative government will live within its means and put more money in your pockets so you can get ahead. It's hard enough to get ahead without the government making it more difficult. If you work hard, you should be able to buy a home, save for retirement, care for your children and your parents as they age. Justin Trudeau is not as advertised. You cannot trust him to help you get ahead. He has raised taxes, racked up debt and deficits, made life more expensive for people like you. With Justin Trudeau, life will become even more unaffordable. The last 4 years have shown that Trudeau is simply not what he advertised himself. Trudeau said he would be accountable and ethical. Instead, he used the power of his office to reward his supporters, to punish his critics. Trudeau said he would help the middle class. Instead, he raised taxes on 80% of the middle class Canadians and brought in a carbon tax that makes everyday essentials more expensive. Trudeau said he would balance the budget. Instead, he has run massive deficits that threaten the sustainability of social programs and increased taxes. Today, Canadians are under pressure and worried about their future. Their dreams are getting further out of reach. They're looking for help. Trudeau has proven he cannot be trusted to deliver it. If Trudeau is re-elected and given 4 more years, his endless deficits will force him to raise taxes even higher. His carbon tax will go up and make gasoline, groceries, home heating even more expensive. His death will consume public services like education and healthcare.
30 seconds.
His poor judgment will lead to more scandals at home and weakness abroad. We're going to put more money in your pocket for you, for your kids, for your parents, removing the GST off your heating bills, scrapping the carbon tax, making parental benefits tax-free, lowering personal taxes, balancing the budgets, attracting better, higher-paying jobs, because it's time for you to get ahead. That's our message.
Thanks, Sarah. Eileen. I beg your pardon, Jennifer. Jennifer.
Thank you. Well, thank you all again for being here tonight and the opportunity to my colleagues up here on the stage. It takes a lot to run and to put your name forward, so thank you. I think what is so important to me and why I continue to stand and put my name forward is because I want to ensure that we are building an economy, an environment that it can withstand and frankly future generations can prosper in. This election is a choice. There's no question. It's a choice between our Liberal government continuing to deliver on moving our country forward, whether that's putting a price on pollution to ensure that it is not free to pollute anymore. It is ensuring gender-based cabinet to ensure that diversity is respected within Parliament. It is ensuring that more people are working in this country and that we're building an economy that is bringing everyone forward. And I think as a representative from this area, what is so crucial is to ensure that you have somebody that is going to bring your ideas and your concerns forward. I am somebody who has a proven track record to fighting for what we believe in. As I said earlier, we may not always agree on the issues, but you're going to get a representative with me bringing these issues forward and pushing the agenda. When it comes to things like youth unemployment rates, this is a critical issue we have to talk about. One of the things we didn't talk about in this region that is incredibly concerning to me is the issues around human trafficking and crime. And I know it's been a long night and we didn't even touch on some of these issues.
30.
So what I am suggesting that in terms of moving forward, do you want a government that is going to make cuts and think about it later, or a government who is making investments in Canadians and investments in communities? Because that is how we've been able to grow the economy, and that's how we've been able to move forward together.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And Eileen.
Thank you. Well, thanks for everybody. And I think we should be very proud of all of us that are sitting up here. I think any one of us I'm very proud of the community of Pickering and Uxbridge. As your MP, I will vigorously pursue the fight against carbon emissions by taxing the highest polluters and changing our vision and our behaviours towards the environment. The NDP government will start building 500,000, 500,000 affordable housing as soon as we're elected. It was going to be over the next 10 years, but we need housing, and we need housing now. A national childcare programme, no more Pickering Airport talk, and electoral
reform.
I haven't get into the whiskey. Didn't you think I have been into the whiskey? Okay. Yeah, I got that. I believe government should care more and do more to strengthen the public services, to create better future for more people. I want to be your champion in Ottawa, willing to stand up against the powerful corporations and their rich friends, to fight climate change and bring a better quality of life to all residents of Pickering and Uxbridge. A vote for Eileen Higdon is a vote to improve the opportunity to give our children and grandchildren the future they deserve. On October 28th, elect Eileen Higdon, Member of Parliament. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Thank you, audience, for staying with us.
Yes, thank you.
There's no way that any one of us in the audience can understand the risk of going public with your thinking, your thoughts, your philosophy, your life over a period of 40 days, such as these people have done and will do. They deserve our respect, they deserve our attention, and you obviously care enough to do that, and they deserve our applause for the work they do to serve us. Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Thank you, Cosmos. Thank you, Larry, if you're still here, wherever you are, for helping us make all this work. Thank you, audience, for hanging in as long as you did. Pass along the very important message that it doesn't matter it matters greatly that you vote. Doesn't matter which way you vote, and obviously it's something that you're going to weigh between now and then, but make sure that you do, because apathy is the enemy of democracy. Thank you so much.